7 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
Being 7 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. First order of business is roll call. Myself, I'm here. Teresa Manganelli,
Present?
Marianne Galizzo,
Here.
Krista Uriel,
Here.
Brad Jackson,
Here.
Andy Levine,
Here.
Joe Levino,
Here.
Scott Neville,
Here.
David Temang.
Here.
Okay, being all here,
Full house.
let's go right into the first thing is budget. Department of Public Works,
Being taped.
and we are being taped for WCTV.
And 3-minute cap on public comments.
And we're going to limit public comments to 3 minutes.
Per speaker.
Jamie, how you doing?
How you doing, Mr. Chairman?
I'm doing
Nice to be
fine.
here. Good evening, members of the committee. Jamie McGauley, for the people at home that don't know me, I'm the Director of Public Works. Here tonight with Deputy Director Joe Labeo, who's our Water and Sewer Specialist. And also in the audience, this time, we have Jerry Lawrenson, our Operations Manager, and Michael Hardeman, our Garage Foreman. Both Jerry and Mike are very instrumental in the preparation of the FY25 budget, so very happy that they're here supporting the team and representing the operations staff. So
Let's go into the budget.
Yep, I did pass out the narratives. There's also a slide packet here, which I'll be using when we talk about personnel and staffing, so I'll ask you to switch to that. But basically, the format here is I'll be going right down the narrative, and certainly feel free to ask any questions, and we can answer them as we go.
Okay.
So you have your narratives. I'll be taking this time to summarize our FY25 budget, highlighting the major changes between FY24 and FY25. And then I'll detail our capital plan. After this time, Joe will take some time to discuss the water and sewer budget. First and foremost, we'd just like to say how grateful we are with the Finance Committee for the past several years now supporting our department. We certainly couldn't have the success that we have without the committee, so we appreciate that. And much of what you see in this budget, including items in furnishings and equipment and capital, derived right from our employees, our boots-on-the-ground workers. It's definitely a collective team effort. The DPW is responsible for the horizontal public infrastructure of the town, excluding public buildings, of course. And our department consists of 6 divisions: highway, parks and grounds, tree, wildwood cemetery, water and sewer, and engineering. We're also responsible for the curbside residential solid waste collection and disposal program, the maintenance of town vehicles and construction equipment, and the construction oversight of permitted site work, town projects, and utility construction. Just like to say, if you haven't signed up for our DPW Twitter yet, members of the public that want to do that can just go on Twitter, do a search for Wilmington DPW, and we post a lot of good PR there, some project updates, public service announcements. Just yesterday, we had a water main break in South Wilmington that we posted. Generally, we'll do that if there's a affected outage area that's very large, so we did that last night. Also, I'd like to just talk about our first responder campaign. We continued that tradition this year and participated in the library's Big Wheels event last June. And we continued the tradition of giving away a large Power Wheels vehicle to, as part of a free raffle to a youngster that showed up. So any child that shows up to this event can get a free raffle ticket. They were very happy that they won that. And also in the fall, our first responder campaign continued the tradition of giving away a grocery store gift card. So we went to social media and we asked the public to nominate needy families that might be in need of extra assistance during their holidays to support their holiday meals. Happy to report that we helped 7 families this year. And so all told, between this year and last year, we've given away over $2,000 worth of free groceries.
Nice.
Thank you. So moving along, the DPW's FY25 non-water budget was created with the goal of maintaining covered levels of service by level funding where possible, and this request is no exception, as unavoidable increases are experienced mainly in personnel services and contractual services due to the request to add an additional employee in Parks and Grounds from the recent expansion of maintainable property, as well as obligatory contractual increases in rubbish collection, the projected increases of energy, and the cost of repair parts. So if you flip your narrative to page 2, you'll see the major category breakdowns of the FY25 budget. You'll see personnel has increased by a modest 2.57%, and that's even with the additional Parks and Grounds employee. And contractual services has increased by 5.72%. There's also an increase of just over 1% in our materials and supplies line item. There's a $29,300 increase in furnishings and equipment, which brings the proposed line item back to where it typically has been in years past, prior to last year, when several items in this category were moved over to the capital plan. So our overall bottom line increase is 3.9%, bringing our total budget to $8,096,216. So moving over to personnel, as discussed, there's a proposed increase of $91,514, or 2.57%, in personnel services, mainly attributed to the request to add an additional Parks and Grounds employee. A 99-year lease on the recreational area at 175 Lowell Street, or the former Textron property, has begun this past January 1st, increasing the field maintenance responsibilities of the Parks and Grounds Division from 40 acres to 45 acres, or by approximately 12.5%. As such, the DPW is requesting a proportionate increase of 1 employee in the existing 7-member Parks and Grounds Division to help accommodate mowing and trimming, field lining, softball, infield grooming, litter removal, and other inevitable duties expected by the public in a public park area. This division was last expanded by 1 man in the FY19 budget when a 7th member of the division was added to help offset increases in responsibility from the addition of the Yentile Farms Park. The Finance Committee was, of course, briefed on this need on November 14th of this past fall during a status update of our feasibility study. So if you take some time and move over to the slides that I showed, I'd just like to justify that now is a really good time, I believe, to ask for this additional employee. I'd like to go over the financials on why that's justified. So Parks and Grounds is just so much more than cutting grass and trimming, and I think the public really needs to know that. Certainly, it's one of our flagship duties in that division, but there's just so much more to it. And as the slide says, we do grass maintenance and field trimming, field lining on multiple high school and youth sports groups, of course, litter and park barrel cleanup where there are barrels. We have an extensive fertilizer and seeding program, mechanical field maintenance, and we do all aspects of turf and plant health care, including integrated pest management, which is called IPM. And essentially, IPM is the practice of doing best management practices in lieu of just simply relying on fertilizers and pesticides. Of course, we do spring and fall cleanups. Anyone that owns a home knows how laborious those tasks can be. In our off-season, we're doing equipment preventative maintenance and other duties associated with snow and ice assistance. So there have been some extensive changes in Parks and Grounds over the last 20 years. Just wanted to highlight some of those. The addition of the irrigated Whitfield School playing field was an addition of 1 acre back in 2008. Our turf management plan was started in FY11. Before this time, we simply used a contractor to come out and do spray fertilizing treatments for our field. Now we're much more focused on biology and soil health. Essentially, we're doing a blood test on our fields before we simply throw any sort of prescription or fertilizer or seed at it. We're very proud of this program, and it's something that we use on all our fields, and we would expect to be doing this as well on the Lowell Street property. Certainly, there's been some expansion of youth groups, such as youth lacrosse. That's a new sport in the past 10 years or so. Little League has introduced fall ball, which Little League has always been a spring sport, but now they've grown. Spring soccer, again, soccer traditionally was a fall sport. Now it's essentially year-round. Summer athletic camps, T-ball expansion, playground expansions. I think we're up to 11 playgrounds now. Various LID maintenance and rain gardens, such as Gentile Park. Much of that area is a biological rain garden, which accounts for our stormwater management plan there. It all requires maintenance. And, of course, the dog park in Yentile Field, just to name a few. So getting into the nitty-gritty here as to why a new employee is justified, I just want to go over some expansion history. Now, what I talked about in the previous slide, expansion is great, it's positive, but whenever we expand, we also have to be mindful of the maintenance duties that are associated with that, and so that's why our division has to grow. Prior to 2002, Parks and Grounds consisted of only 4 full-time workers. In the 2002 budget, former DPW Superintendent Don Onesite expanded staff by a full 50%, or 2 more guys to make it 6 employees. And that was done with the expansion of fields at the middle school, which accounted for approximately 5 acres. Then in the FY19 budget, Parks and Grounds expanded to 7 workers with the addition of 8 acres at Yentile Farms recreational facility. And this increased our maintainable acreage by 15%. So we were successful in FY19, adding a 7th man to that division. Now, what we've done recently is mainly this employee would be to justify the growth on the Lowell Street property, which is essentially 5 acres total, 4 of which are playing fields. But as you see in your packets, we also have the new town hall, which is essentially only about a half acre. Granted, that area is the Swain area, which we still maintain, but there's very light grass cutting there, and even with the new town hall, there won't be a lot of grass cutting associated with that, in addition to what's there now, but it's still about a half acre worth of growth. The new senior center, conversely, is about a 5.5 acre addition to maintainable acreage. A lot of grass cutting and weed whacking there. No, no athletic fields. We may have some pickleball courts, but as far as athletic fields, the bulk of the work that would be associated with this new employee essentially would be with the Lowell Street property.
Question for you.
Sure.
The fields on Lowell Street, okay, what's it going to take to get them into shape?
So I'll be going into a little bit of that in this presentation.
Okay.
When I met, I know, Mr. Chairman, I don't think you were at the November meeting this past fall when I did a status update on that project, but we did accept a grant to conduct a feasibility study on that property.
Okay.
And it's essentially, we have our field consultant, Tom Irwin Company, is doing that now, and we're not done with that study yet. But they are in the process of reaching out to all the stakeholders in town, namely the youth sports, the school department, Little League, youth soccer, and we're trying to figure out what we want first there. So right now, there are 3 softball fields, but the question is, would it be better doing 1 softball field and maybe 2 small soccer fields or 2 large soccer fields? So until we figure that out, we'll tailor the fertilizer program to that, and they'll give us some options on how we can tailor our capital plan in order to meet those expectations.
Okay.
So that'll be part of our capital plan. The operating budget is strictly geared toward keeping the grass cut, mowed, and fed.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So moving over to the next page of the slide, there's a bar graph here, and what this does is it compares maintainable acreage per parks employee, or the ratio of maintained acres per employee. So in FY19, we were at 8.7 acres per employee with 7 full-time men, and that's where we're at now. Of course, the increase of 11 acres total, which again, 5 acres at the Lowell Street property, 5.5 at the new senior center, and a half acre at the new town hall, brings us up to 10.3 acres per employee if we maintain status quo with 7 employees. So what I'm looking to do is add an 8th employee here so that we can bring that bar graph back down to where it is now, roughly 9 acres per employee. Because as I stated at the beginning of the presentation, the goal is to try to, keep our level of service either equal or more. This is probably the most important slide in the whole presentation. And then I'll get off the slideshow. But you do have the numbers in front of you. So what this does is it compares, if we were to keep our 7 employees and consider outsourcing, I've gone down an analysis of what that would cost the town versus if we were to hire a full-time worker and make it 8 employees. So essentially, we would need to either have overtime or outsourcing for grass cutting and trimming. Again, at the start of the presentation, I mentioned grass cutting is such a small portion of overall what Parks and Grounds does, but it really is the bare bones. So this $9,800 is actually a real quote that was actually taken from the folks at Textron, because they were hiring out the grass cutting on that property. Keep in mind, this is not prevailing wage, so realistically, this cost would be a lot more. In addition to that, we would need to outsource field lining and infield dragging. If we were to have a softball field there, or 2 or 3, or if we were to just do soccer fields, we would either need lining or field dragging or both. So the $10,000 there would be an annual cost, assuming 24 weeks of clay dragging roughly twice a week and field painting. We would then need to outsource our turf management plan implementation, which assumes about 3 treatments per year, certain IPM strategies such as aerating the turf, maybe thatching, top dressing, and certainly pest control. When I say pest control, I don't just mean grubs and that sort of thing, but weeds are considered pests too. So in order to keep a healthy turf field, you really do need to tackle weed growth, because weeds will lead to different problems with the turf, such as compaction And the whole purpose here is to try to keep a lush growth, which is what we do on the rest of our fields. The ancillary benefit of that is the field looks great, but the real reason we do that is for concussion resistance. It's about safety. If your field is lush, similar to the synthetic turf fields, which is one of the benefits there, there is a lot greater concussion resistance in those fields. And so we're trying to invest into our natural turf fields in order to improve the concussion
Would you
resistance.
be putting in irrigation?
We would definitely need to put in irrigation on that field, yes.
And how much would that be?
Rough estimates from our consultant right now are about $100,000 to $150,000 for irrigation.
Thank you.
It's 4 acres. And then lastly, we would need to outsource miscellaneous services such as litter pickup, trash removal. Even if we didn't have barrels out there, we still need to go out and pick up what's blown around, what people are leaving behind. So all told, at the bottom, if we were to keep status quo and outsource, you're looking at roughly a cost of about $540,000 a year. That includes our personnel of our 7 men plus outsourcing. Conversely, if we were to add an 8th worker, that's a cost of about $58,000 just for straight salary, not including benefits. So that would be about $560,000. So you're saying, well, it's still more expensive to have the 8th employee, but the reason that we should do this now is we want to take care of some credits that we have coming to us. So we do have a member in our highway division that's been here for 36 years, that's retiring this May. So because of that and his longevity and step raises, we will be taking advantage this year of a $21,000 reduction in personnel. So we can put that money right toward this.
Does this figure include benefits?
It does not include benefits.
Thank you.
Yep. And then, in addition to that, we are actually eliminating our part-time intern in engineering. This intern has not been used in the past 4 to 5 years. And we found it more beneficial to channel some of that funding, which is about a $12,000 expense. We're taking about $5,700 of that and putting it toward this as well. So all told, when you add up your credits, we have about $533,000, which is less than what it would be to just keep status quo and outsource. Keep in mind, this analysis is just for the Lowell Street fields. Now, if you remember, I had also talked about the town hall and the senior center. So certainly, when you add the maintenance of those 2 properties in, the scales are definitely tipped in our favor to do this. So that's why I believe now's the time to ask for this employee. Any questions on personnel?
I actually have a question for you.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
So on page 2, you have a change in personnel services of $91,514. And you just mentioned about $58,000 for the new employee. Can you tell me what the difference is? And is that annual increases for,
It's essentially step raises for the rest of the employee.
okay, I figured, okay, thank you.
It's not dollar for dollar for a new
Exactly,
employee.
yeah.
That's a good point.
Have you negotiated contracts with all your unions?
We're actually in the middle of one right now. So we have a current contract that brings us to the end of this fiscal year, and then we're currently in negotiations.
So they'll come out of the other line item, right, Lou?
The COLAs?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question too.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
Okay. What do you do with this employee? I love this analysis, by the way, the most
Thank you.
important slide. I think that's excellent. What do you do with that employee? And I know you've mentioned this before, during the winter or when you're not out there, cutting grass or treating it or anything like that. How do you?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's valid. So what we're doing, obviously snow and ice is a major part of what Parks and Grounds does. All of those guys have their own plowing routes. They're very heavily involved in salting the walkways, for instance, at like the town common and the school walking route areas. We're also, if you've noticed, we're taking the picnic tables in and different park items. We actually take those in and garage them and refurbish them over the winter. So we will be sanding picnic tables down, all the wood tables, we'll be painting them. We also take the time to go through all of our 2-cycle motors, our weed whackers, our mowers, and do all the PM on those, the preventative maintenance. Because as you know, in the growing season, and lately it's been starting in mid-March, once we get out there and start cutting and trimming and weed whacking, the youth sports in this town is a very busy entity. So once we start doing that, unless we have a rainy day, there's very little time to do PM on the equipment. So that's essentially why we would need them year-round. Well,
Brett?
Thanks. This is a very helpful analysis. The 7 full-time employees we have now, they're currently members of a collective bargaining unit?
Yes, the same one as our entire DPW staff, yeah, asked me
So-
to.
I don't know, I mean, I appreciate the analysis, but aren't we prohibited, since they're the exclusive bargaining agent for individuals who do this work?
Mhm.
Aren't we, in essence, prohibited from hiring a contractor to do this work because we'd be taking union work away from our union? I mean, that's kind of called union busting,
So
isn't it?
I think it still behooves us to do the analysis, just to prove to the public that I think financially it does make sense to hire.
Mhm.
I would expect if we were to go down the road of fully outsourcing park maintenance at an entire park, we would likely have an issue with the union. But we're not even at that point yet,
Well, I
which,
would say, as someone who's worked with public unions for 30 years, I would say you would most definitely have a problem and a grievance on your
and
hands.
I don't think I would be doing my due diligence if I came in tonight and my
Well, I just think
analysis
it's
was.
important, no, I agree with you.
Sure.
But I just think it's important that out of the box, this analysis is very helpful, but out of the box, it's not a viable option because we are working with public unions here who have the exclusive right to bargain on behalf of the men and women who do this work. And we can't hire a non-union employee to do union work. That's against the law. As I understand it,
Sure.
unless it's changed in the
No,
past.
I agree, and like I said, I think it's still beneficial to do the analysis
I-
because
I don't disagree. I just
I
want
just didn't want to rely on that as our only reason.
I just think it's important to show.
And to be
Well,
quite
some-
honest with you, we do contract out a lot of the subservices, still, and that's a healthy relationship with our union, and it's something I'd like to continue, but it's certainly not 100% of the
Right.
maintenance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I actually would, through you,
No, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, would go so far as to say that when this first came about, I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room that thought, you're going to hire somebody, maybe we could get somebody part-time, it's basically just during the summer or whatever. But I think between your discussion right now, it's clear that that's not a direction we could have gone in or should go in, and you've chosen the correct route, so.
Thank you for that. And if you recall, in November, I did bring up the issue that we will have, because we've already taken the lease over, but of course, our budget doesn't start until July 1st. So there will be some inevitable duties and grass cutting, baseline mowing and trimming that we'll be looking to do, this spring for a couple of months. I can talk about that at the end of the presentation, but we would still be looking at a slight increase in either overtime or contractual services to help us maintain, just to bring us to July 1st.
Thank you.
Also through you, Mr. Chair. Have you been able or thought about increasing your summer help?
So that's an interesting question, because we used to be able to get about 13 to 14 summer help kids. Like any other position, those are even hard to fill lately. I think last summer we only had 8 to 9 summer help interns. And really, it's only a couple of months anyway. We
Right.
usually get them by the end of June. They work June, July, maybe half of August at best. And, in between there, they might be taking family vacations, which they should. They're young. They're only young ones. But we're budgeted for more than 8. So, anyone listening to this presentation, if you're looking for summer help, we're definitely accepting applications, usually closer to the end of the spring. But the town manager's office would be the contact for that.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to move along in the interest of time. So that justifies the Parks and Grounds employee. Similarly, the cemetery division has not seen personnel growth since the reduction of staff over 30 years ago, when cemetery was consolidated and absorbed by the superintendent of public works at that time. Since then, mowing frequency, higher frequency, turf management, trimming, monument foundation construction, and increases in maintenance due to the expansions of sections N, O, P, and the newest cemetery section Q have required the division to borrow help from the other divisions such as the highway division. Which package are we in? You're back to the narrative now.
Top of page 3. Top
Thank
of
you.
page 3.
Got it. Top of page.
Narrative.
Thank you. So just talking about the cemetery, this in turn puts a strain on those other divisions and does not allow for consistent maintenance schedules within the cemetery division. As such, the DPW originally requested the expansion of staff in the division from 2 to 3 employees. However, we have conceded to defer this request to subsequent years and will continue to borrow help from other divisions until proper personnel expansion can be made. I just wanted to go on record as saying we're also expanding in other divisions such as the cemetery. I'm not looking for another cemetery employee this cycle, but it may be something that we would have to reinvestigate in subsequent years.
The expansion of the current cemetery, you took over a house and demolished it. Columbarium's going in there as well?
Eventually, they will likely line the back perimeter of that. We're in the process of, actually, I think we just finished bidding out 2 more columbariums, so those are going over in Section N, if you're familiar with the cemetery, where the 2 existing ones are. We're
Yep.
going to be continuing that road down to the street. When we run out of space there, we're going to likely put them in other sections of the cemetery. So the new Section Q, which is what you're referring to, is likely a location that we will be putting them in.
How many, I was going to say, I don't know.
Mailboxes?
How many
Remains?
remains can be put in there?
So each columbarium unit has space for 32 niches. They're
Okay.
called niches.
Yeah.
Essentially, each niche has room for 2 urns, so 64.
Okay.
And right now, we've changed, the Cemetery Commission has changed the rules and regulations there, so you can actually pre-buy those before they're needed.
6 months in advance, right?
6 minutes?
6 months in advance.
No, you can buy them, so that is the only portion of the cemetery that you can buy pre-need at any time, as long as you're a Wilmington resident or a former Wilmington resident.
Okay. Because I saw something online, you could buy grave sites 6 months in advance if you're
How do you know?
passing or whatever?
Yeah,
The niches are the only ones that
Good
you can
question.
pre-buy.
Okay.
How
yeah, I'm not
pop-
sure what the 6 months is referring to, but.
Have they been very popular? Are the other,
Yeah, since we released them for
Structures full?
pre-buy, they're very popular. So that's, essentially by selling what we have, that's what funded the purchase of the 2 new ones. So it'll be a rotating account. We're not looking for capital money to roll that in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
and one more question?
Go ahead.
Besides the columbariums that you'd be putting in the new area, do you have plans on creating expansion of the traditional burial areas over there?
In the other sections, there's not a lot of space to do that. We actually just finished filling Section N, which is the section to the left of the garage. And so right now, the only 2 sections available for a full-body burial, well, it's actually just one section, Section Q. So we have about 10 years of life in that new section with, and there are 2 grave lots in that section. So
Is that
The
to the
bra-
right of the garage?
Section Q is the 64 Wildwood Street lot that we
Okay,
just.
what about to the right of the garage?
To the right of the garage is what's called Section O, and the Cemetery Commission just voted recently to make those cremation burial lots only. So that's actually our
Really?
first section where if
Oh,
you
wow.
wanted to buy a 2-grave lot where you could fit in 6 urns per grave, or basically a 12-urn lot for your entire family, that's our only section where you could purchase those and put an upright monument. So we're going to wait to see how those sell, but we think that's a very attractive option. And the reason that we're going to cremation burials there is the groundwater level in that section is a little bit high. And with all the rain we've had, we just didn't want to take the risk of putting full caskets.
People floating away.
You never know.
So Section Q, if I can understand this, is the newly expanded piece of the cemetery.
That's correct.
So you're saying that it could take up to 10 years before you have full-body burials in there?
No, it's actually open now. We have a couple of families in there already.
Oh,
But we
okay.
have, it gives us about 10 years of extra life to the cemetery
I
in
see.
total.
Okay.
And they can have full memorials?
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So moving along, a modest change is also being requested in our tree division, which includes reintroducing our G5 tree climber position back into the budget. This position was originally downgraded last year to a G4, which is entry-level equipment operator, as an interim measure, as the town's qualified tree climber resigned. As the town has since obtained a new qualified and skilled tree climber, we would like to reintroduce this position to help reduce reliance on outside assistance, and prevent the DPW from requesting another increase in contractual services. So essentially there, we're looking to take a G4 and increase it to a G5, which is what we used to have a few years ago. That's a specialized tree climber position. We had to get rid of that and reduce it back to a G4 because our tree climber at the time resigned. We didn't have anyone on staff that was qualified enough to take that position. So we knew that reducing that would be an interim measure. By bringing back the G5, it's an increase of about $4,000 annually, which more than enough, saves us from having to contract out, because it would be a lot more than $4,000 annually to hire a qualified tree climber. Equipment operator Joseph Duffy, who is a G65, will be retiring in May as a 36-year staff member of the town. As such, his vacancy will ultimately help offset some of the increases due to step raises, longevity benefits, and the request for additional staff. I also talked about this already. This year, we've eliminated $12,740 from the engineering part-time line item, as the DPW has historically not used this funding over the past several years. $7,000 of this has been redirected to highway contractual services to help fund outside assistance from licensed land surveyors and miscellaneous engineering consultants, as this money is better suited toward assistance from licensed professionals instead of interns. The remaining $5,700 roughly will help offset the cost of step raises, obligatory longevity benefits, and the request for additional staffing in parks and grounds. And as we already discussed, a contractual COLA for both non-represented management personnel and personnel covered under ASME Unit 2 has not been factored into this budget yet. Any questions on personnel? Seeing no more, I will move to contractual services. As discussed, contractual services has increased by approximately 5.72%. The town enters into year 5 of a 5-year agreement with Wheelabrator, North Andover, and Kinsella Waste. And due to the state's newer mattress waste ban, which requires mattresses to be recycled, the rubbish collection and disposal line items will experience a contractual 6.14% increase, which amounts to approximately $143,000 in change.
Question for you on that. Do we get penalized if someone does put out a mattress, or?
It wouldn't get picked up. So this is a state ban. So the process now, because they're not, if it made its way into the trash truck and at the incinerator plant, it would be likely that the trash hauler would get a fine or be warned.
Okay.
And that fine would ultimately come back to the town, but the haulers know not to pick up mattresses, so that's not likely.
Can the current contractual rubbish, can they be put out on like a Friday and be picked up, or?
Mattresses?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually pick them up just like we would white goods. So if anyone
Okay.
has a mattress to pick up, you would purchase a sticker like you
Yep.
would a dishwasher or so on at the town hall, and they're picked up weekly. I believe it's on Tuesdays or
Okay, great, thank you.
Mondays. Yeah, you're welcome. And just so you know, this year, our recycling rate was 27%, which is the highest it's ever been since we switched over to automated recycling. Even though savings continues to be experienced in public streetlights from the benefits of converting over to LED streetlights, the rising cost of energy associated with post-COVID-19 economy and supply chain have resulted in an anticipated 10% energy surcharge based on communications from our colleagues over at RMLD. The town is also seeing a slight increase in the cost of repair to existing traffic signal equipment due to parts and labor inflation. Overall, this increases the public streetlights line item by about 4% or $6,500. A modest increase of $5,000 is also proposed in each of the Parks and Grounds miscellaneous contractual services and road machinery repairs to help offset increases experienced from parts inflation. A projected 7% increase based on discussion with repair part suppliers and vendors has resulted in an increase of about $8,100 in the town vehicle repair account, which has been justified by 2 years of experiencing drastic increases in expenses there. Moving on to materials and supplies. Materials and supplies line item has experienced an approximate 1.1% increase, mainly due to parts inflation and the increase of 4 acres of natural grass playing area at the newly leased former Textron property. The cost of salt this year has decreased from $70.47 to $57 a ton. However, this line item has been level funded due to unpredictable weather patterns. Essentially, climate change has taken over, and this year alone, although it doesn't seem like we've received a lot of snow, we're over 20 inches, believe it or not. We've salted 8 times, which is not usually average by this time of year, we're somewhere around 15. So this year is a little bit different, but what we saw last year was a lot more rain events, and what that leads to is a lot more black icing events and a lot more use of salt. So even though the price of salt has dropped, we want to keep this level funded rather than looking at savings this year. We might ask for a reduction in years to come, but it's unlikely because it's just so unpredictable the way the weather's been.
How are we doing with independent contractors for snow plowing?
We did raise the rates this year. We're trying to remain competitive, and so we did that early, and that was a good move because we're making out very well. We had a full staff of contractors this year.
Okay. Because I'm not for anything, I've seen those signs all over the place in
It's been very challenging.
in various communities.
Statewide, to be honest with you, and that's why we wanted to jump on it early. We did release our new rates well before Mr. Hull retired, and so we were able to kind of lock that in. A lot of the other towns waited, and they dragged their feet a little bit, and they're paying the price now. So now if it could just snow, it would be business.
Thank you.
Fuel use is relatively stable, and prices have begun to recede after a subtle climb last year, as predicted. The town continues to experience savings by switching over to more fuel-efficient SUV police cruisers. The DPW has held the projected cost of wholesale gas to remain at $3.30 a gallon, and wholesale diesel to remain at $4 per gallon, which is the same as last year, so level funded.
The police cruisers, what's the expected life on those?
I'd probably defer to our garage foreman here, but a frontline cruiser it depends on what the use is, I think is the best response to that. So a frontline cruiser would probably have a life of 1 to 2 years. And then at that point, they would maybe hand it over to one of the detective units or something that's really not all the time involved in a high-speed chase or running 24 hours a day. It's much different than a vehicle that we would buy for like administration staff. These frontline cruisers are literally running 24 hours a day. So it's the idling hours on them, not so much the mileage.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Yeah, so fuel. So modest increases of $500, $2,000, and $650 have been proposed in cemetery construction supplies, care of grounds, and tools and equipment to support the cemetery division's expense history and maintenance demands associated with recent expansion. There's roughly a 10% increase being requested in the Parks and Grounds repair construction account to accommodate the turf management program implementation on the additional 4 acres of athletic fields. So this equates to a $10,000 increase, bringing the total budget for this line item to $106,000 and change. So again, that is just basic for our IPM and our turf management on that Lowell Street property. Regardless of what comes out of the feasibility study, we know there's going to be natural grass there most likely. So the subtle differences between softball field and soccer field may alter that plan a little bit, but we do know we were going to need something. And it should have the results of that feasibility study within the next couple of months, which I'd like to share with the select board.
Thank you.
Moving over to furnishings and equipment. Total budget request for furnishings and equipment has increased by approximately $29,000 from last year. But if you recall, last year we switched over several items over to the capital plan to try to reduce the operating budget. So that's why it feels like a drastic climb, but it's actually much in line with what's been proposed in years past. I can run down these items real quick. We're looking for $24,000 for a new zero-turn mower for the cemetery division. That's to replace a 2012 zero-turn. We're looking for $6,500 for diagnostic software upgrade for our Cummins diesel engines in the garage. We're looking for $9,500 to purchase a stand-up mower for the highway division. This would accommodate mowing at a lot of our veterans lots and other small areas. We're looking for $8,000 for irrigation pump repair. That's a general maintenance item to repair a lot of the well pumps and well points at some of our irrigated fields. We're looking for $6,500 at Yentile Park to expand some of the fencing down there on the Route 38 side. If you recall, there's a double netting set up there which helps stop soccer balls and lacrosse balls from going across 38. But we are looking to put some flank chain link fencing on the existing fencing there just to help accommodate the areas where the netting stops. It would just be a lot more economical than expanding the netting. If we can stop 5 more balls from entering Route 38, that would be a bonus. And then we're looking for $2,400 twice here, so $4,800 total to construct 2 swing gates behind each of the West Intermediate and the Boutwell School to prevent traffic from going around those schools. I could now highlight the capital plan. So this year, we're looking for $660,000 total, but only $330,000 from highway, and the other $330,000 will be coming from the water budget, to purchase a replacement heavy-duty Vector jet truck for shared use of highway and water and sewer. This is to replace a 2009 Sterling truck, and the parts for the current Sterling truck chassis have been discontinued because that truck is now obsolete. They're not making parts for that anymore. And acquiring parts of future repairs will obviously become problematic. This vehicle is one of the most heavily relied upon maintenance vehicles in the fleet for emergencies and water breaks, where precise excavation and main cleanings are of utmost importance to restore public safety and essential service to residents. I would also add that as a matter of employee safety, this vehicle has become critical. We use it quite frequently to repair water mains. In an instance where we cannot shut the water main down 100%, we might have to use the Vector truck portion to dewater the trench while the employee is working. We're also using this when the excavations are in close proximity to gas mains or other critical utilities. It's a highly, highly used emergency vehicle. It's a type of a vehicle that when we need it, we need it. Relying on a rental is not feasible because, number one, they're very hard to rent. Number two, they're very costly, and a lot of these entities will not rent a piece of equipment like this without an operator attached to it because obviously they don't want it to be used incorrectly. So we're looking at over $1,000 today to rent a piece of equipment like this. So
Any trade-in value on this?
yes, there is a trade-in value on our current truck of about $20,000. And what we'd like to do, we use that as a contingency. So, by the time town meeting comes around and votes on it, and then we put the order in, by the time that locks in, there could be a contingency increase. And so we typically have been using the trade-in values as contingency for flexibility.
That's true for all the equipment, because there's
That's correct. That's typically, historically, how we've handled that. And the other thing is, a lot of these pieces of equipment have long build dates. It could take a year or more. So, what happens in the meantime is we're still using the old equipment. It could break down completely and lose its trade-in value, so it's not something we want to rely upon. Item number 2 is a heavy-duty front-end loader. We're looking for $205,000 to replace an existing 2008 John Deere loader, which is one of our most heavily used snow and ice vehicles in the fleet. It's also used to load the salt trucks, cut down snow banks, and load vehicles during construction. Item number 3, we're looking for a replacement infield groomer. So we have 2 of these. They are used for the baseball and softball fields to groom the clay infields. This is a $38,000 purchase. This particular piece of equipment is much more powerful than the one we have now. It has a belly rake on it and also a drag behind, so we can essentially do twice the work in half the amount of time with this replacement. Item number 4 is something that I had mentioned in the fall. It is a heavy-duty wing mower, and it is $50,000. Essentially, this is a smaller version of our flagship wing mower that we would use not exclusively for the Lowell Street property, but it would certainly help with that. And this is the item that I was actually looking for advanced funding in November, and I would still be asking the committee to consider that now. If the answer is no, what that means is we would go to town meeting for $50,000, hopefully get it approved. But the problem is we would not have this piece of equipment to do any cutting at the Textron property this spring. So if we were to get advanced funding, these mowers are in stock. We could essentially put an order in for this mower and, likely get it within several weeks.
Teresa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion that the Finance Committee approve expending $50,000 for the purchase of a heavy-duty mini wing mower for use with the DPW. The funds to be taken from the Finance Committee discretionary funding account.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Does this fall under the,
Sorry.
does this actually fall under emergency?
Yeah, it's unanticipated
It's unexpected. We can do that.
during this year, yeah.
So. Any further discussion? Scott?
What's the life cycle of this that we're looking at?
Of this particular mower?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, these zero turns, they last for about 8 to 10 to 12 years. It depends on how well it's maintained and used. And so what this will also do, though, is reduce reliance on our flagship mower, the one that we got funding for last year, which was around $160,000, much bigger piece of equipment.
Yeah.
So this may actually extend the life of that more expensive piece of equipment, too.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Public discussion? Name and address, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just can, what's the current balance in that account? Does anybody? have we-
1.2 million.
That's what we set aside every year for contingency? Thank you.
We usually don't hit anything through there until we're at
Yeah,
town
towards the-
meeting, and then we have sand and icing and those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Public comment, name and address, please.
Kevin McDonald,
The address?
148 Oak Street.
Okay.
Before I make my comments, just a quick question. In the town bylaws, can you tell us where in the bylaws that it gives the finance committee legal right to bypass town meeting for like a $50,000 purchase or?
Actually, sir, it's not in the bylaws, it's in state law. We're state chartered.
Okay, do you know that general law and chapter?
Not off the top of my head, no, I have to look it up.
Okay, fine. I just want to offer my opinion on this particular thing. The last meeting I mentioned that the town's self-insured for employees.
Sir, we're talking about a $50,000 mower.
And it's for the additional hiring and the caretaking of that
Sir,
field.
stay on topic, please.
My conversations relative to this purchase of the mower, and it's my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason for the additional purchase is because we're looking to hire an additional person to take care of a field that probably is only used 6 months of the year. So my comments are specific to my opposition to this purchase. And the reason why I'm opposed to this is because the town's self-insured for employee benefits, and that's part of the reason why I don't believe that we should take on another employee versus subcontracting it out to a landscaping company. One of the members said that it's against the law to hire a company that's non-union to do a town union job. And I think that that's like blatantly wrong, because there's plenty of non-union companies that do utility work. We are subcontracting.
Sir, there are different-
Snow plowing.
There are a variety of state laws out there that do
That's
require,
definitely not one of them. It's definitely not.
that do require,
This was called collective bargaining.
no,
And
no,
when you're negotiating a contract that's not signed yet, if there's any question, you negotiate that into the contract. And so, we are having our employee health benefits increase $1 million this year. We just got I think it was like an $8 million assessment for pensions. So we have $175,000. If this new employee was to get hurt, okay, before we collect anything from stop loss insurance, we have to pay $175,000. We're looking to hire a guy to.
you are
assist-
off topic.
It's totally pertaining to what your discussion is right now, and it's why I am opposed to it. Because I think it should be subcontracted out, and I think it should be subcontracted out to an ambulance company, and that's my position on that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your
I would
comments.
like to make some additional comments.
John,
I
that's
was hoping
Thank
that-
you for your
Thank
comments.
you, sir. I just wanted to ask you a question. If these gentlemen could stay for public comment time, so I could ask the other questions that are on topic.
You've already
Thank you
reached
for your
3
comments.
minutes.
Any other comments on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Moving on, item number 5. DPW is looking for $75,000 for the NIPD's general permit services. This is essentially in the capital plan every year. This year, we're looking for $75,000. It's essentially money to help us comply with running our stormwater system in town. It is a federal requirement. It essentially helps us contract out for pond cleaning. It helps us supplement our existing catch basin cleaning program. And that is our, it's called an MS4. Item number 6, we are looking for $60,000 to help us with phase cemetery development. This year, since we've just recently finished our newest section Q, we will likely be using the majority of this funding for roadway repairs in the cemetery. Of course, roadways in the cemetery do not qualify for Chapter 90 funding because they're not a public way. So that's why we are looking for extra money there. $60,000 just incidentally will not really go too far in the cemetery, but we're doing it little by little there, tackling some of the worst roads. We also may be using some of this funding for fence repair, guardrail repairs, and miscellaneous items. Item number 7, we are looking for an additional $50,000 to help supplement some funding to get us started at the Lowell Street Fields. If you recall, in November, I summarized a grant that we qualified for. We do currently have a $75,000 EMI that we are using to help fund the feasibility study. The feasibility study was approximately $32,000. So we do have about $43,000 left of that earmark, but that will likely be going toward advanced funding for design and permitting on whatever direction we decide to go on that property. So we are looking to supplement that with an additional $50,000. What would I see that money going toward? Likely it could go toward preliminary construction, probably preliminary field reconstruction, reseeding, maybe some slice seeding in that area. If the select board does decide to do a complete overhaul of that property, it would be much more expensive, but we are prepared in our 5-year capital plan to keep adding, a little bit of money each year. As we said before, Rome wasn't built in a day. I don't expect the Wall Street field will be pristine in short order. It's going to take a little bit of time, just like the rest of our field now.
How are you going to connect Yentl to Lowell Street?
So I was on the Intel Farm Development Committee, and this was thought about at that time. In the back of the Intel property, there is a walkway. You can ever walk back there, at least for a turnaround area. The intent there all along was to eventually talk through if we could get either a lease or purchase on these fields. So it would be the back of the Lowell Street property where it connects to the Intel one. That would have to be permitted before that's constructed. But essentially, we would at least have a walking path between those two parks. That would be the idea. And that would become a little bit more clear once the feasibility study is done.
I've been by 175 Lowell Street quite a bit, and what's going to be done for parking?
Again, we would wait to see what the feasibility study comes back at. One of the ideas, we're a little bit restricted because it's a 99-year lease. We would need to get permission from National Development in order to do permanent piers there. But we do have a 4-court tennis court off of Wall Street that is in pretty rough shape. There's some significant structural cracking on that. If you go out there now, there's actually a rubber pad covering most of the tennis court because whoever was renting that before really couldn't use that area for what they wanted to use it for soccer practice. That pad is glued down, so we really couldn't get a good look as far as what's under there. But we'll be carrying that up. There's some existing cracking there that would really, in my opinion, and again, this is before the feasibility study is complete, but my opinion there is that the tennis court would likely have to be completely reconstructed for it to be used without cracking. We could likely crack fill it, but those crack fills only last about 2 years or so. So the alternative could be to eliminate maybe half that court or more to expand the parking.
And what about water? Isn't there a brook that goes by there?
That is a wetland on one side. Actually, there's wetlands on both sides there, but the fields itself are mostly upland. So
Okay.
they are within resource areas, so whatever is done out there would have to be like permitted through the conservation.
Thank you.
And lastly, for non-water capital, item number 8 is a drainage culvert lining at 340 Valladale Street. We're looking for $135,000 to rehab an existing 24-inch corrugated metal drainage culvert. That's in the vicinity of 340 Valladale. That's over by where the Market Basket warehouse is. This culvert is in rough shape. The alternative here would be to do a complete reconstruction. What that would cause us to do is shut the road down for an extended amount of time, several weeks. Because of the amount of trucking and commerce that goes through that way, especially with what's going on at the Market Basket warehouse, it would be much more economical for us to simply do a slip line of that culvert for about half the price. So that's what we're looking to do, and this way, too, traffic would be minimally impacted.
Is that like what you did over by Butters Row?
We have done this before. I don't recall us doing that near Butters Road. The last time this was done, I believe, was on Middlesex Ave.
Okay, thank you.
And before I turn this over to Joe to talk about water and sewer, I appreciate the Finance Committee's advanced funding for the mower. There were 2 other items in that request. They're essentially small dollar items, but again, this would just be to get us through the spring with some expansion of overtime funding to do some potential mowing and cutting there. And we're looking at an increase of our overtime budget of about $3,600. And also an increase of $2,400 in contractual services to do some first cut spring cutting out there. So I'm not sure if that's something that we can absorb in our current budget. I can certainly have a discussion with the town manager about that, or if it's something
Actually,
that you
we
want
can
to
do that at the end of the budget season and do a transfer.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
thank you.
If there's no other questions about the non-water items, I will turn it over to Mr. LeBeo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Good evening, everybody. I'll pretty much follow the same format that I have in years past. We're identical to Jamie. We'll take a look at the page 9 on the packet that was distributed. And then what I'll do to follow is I'll just hit all the major categories and then talk about what changes were necessary, how much they were, and why we made them. So starting down the list, we'll start at personnel services, a total budget of just over $1 million. That increases $16,299. That's a 1.5% jump. And similar to the employees in DPW, this is related primarily to contractual obligations related to step increases and overtime. And as you know, COLA has not been factored into this budget, and water, or sewer actually for that matter, are request any additional personnel. And as we move down the list to contractual services, we have a total budget of just over $1 million. And this year there were 3 adjustments, and these reflect an overall decrease of $682,192. That's a decrease of almost 40%. And well, let me start with the first adjustment. As you know, is pretty much the same every year. That's the MWRA assessment. And as a reminder, there's 2 components to that assessment. There's an annual fixed amount that we pay yearly of $208,000. And that's an entrance fee that started in 2009 when the town first entered the MWRA. That's a 20-year term, so that's set to expire in 2029. So that's a fixed fee of $208,000. And the balance remainder of that assessment is $490,000, and that's for the amount of water that was purchased in calendar year '23. So that's how you come up with the $710,000. And just to expand a little bit on the MWRA, you might recall from previous years that this second amount of this assessment changes drastically from year to year based on the amount of water that's used townwide. So unlike in 2022, when we had an extremely dry and hot summer and water usage and demand was up, 2023, as you know, very rainy, cool. The summer was unlike 2022, so water demand was down. Therefore, that's why you see the reduction in cost to the MWRA assessment. The second adjustment within this classification is under professional and technical services. This increases $27,000, that's 11.2%. This is directly attributed to an increase in costs for third-party laboratory services and also for supplies and materials for our own lab within the 2 treatment plants. And then the last adjustment within this class, it's slight but small. It's an increase of $808 for the DEP assessment. That's an annual regulatory requirement based on the amount of water that's distributed to consumers in calendar year 2022. Moving on to the third classification, we have utilities, or a total budget of $395,750. This class sees a $12,000 jump, and that's 3%. And this is driven by the rising costs of telephone and heating oil for the 2 water treatment plants. Moving on to materials and supplies, We have a total budget of $796,667, and there were two adjustments this year that represent an overall increase of $55,000. That's a 7.4% increase. The first is under facility maintenance and supplies. This increase is $30,000. This is due to the rising costs to complete repairs at the two aging water treatment plants. Also costs to dispose of water treatment plant residuals. And then the second adjustment is under the chemical sub-account, which these are the products that are used to safely treat drinking water for the town of Wilmington. And that increase is $25,000, which is 8.3%. And that's related to the availability of items due to supply and demand. And just as you recall, you might remember, I've mentioned this in the past, the town of Wilmington is a member of a consortium. So we purchase these chemicals amongst a group of 75 or so other public water suppliers. So we feel like we get a better value than if we were to bid these out independently. And that's the end for materials and supplies. We can move on to furnishings and equipment. There's a total budget of $60,500, and that's a slight decrease of $148. That's an under 1% decrease, and there are 5 items all listed within your packet. The first is $10,000 to replace the SCADA unit at the Sargent Water Treatment Plant. This is essentially the brains of the water treatment facilities. It controls operations 24/7. The current unit's 4 to 5 years old. They're recommended for replacement every 3 to 5. We have 4 total units, and you'll see these every year. We have a one-off, so every year we replace one. Second item, we have $20,000 to replace the 2 NTU meters at the Sargent Water Treatment Plant. These current units are obsolete, and they're critical to the operations of the plant. They're used daily. The current units are 20 years old. Life expectancy is about 20 years old, and they are necessary to operate the plant. The third item, $8,000 for, it says a forklift for Sargent Water Treatment Plant, but that's my mistake. It's more of a pallet jack. It's exactly what it says it is. It's a battery-operated pallet jack to help the operators transport chemicals. Sometimes these pallets weigh several thousand pounds, so it's in everyone's best interest to replace the existing unit. The second to last item under furnishings, there's a $19,000 line item to rebuild or replace the altitude valve at the Hillside Way water storage tank. This valve controls the draining and filling of the water tank, and it's leaking by. It's part of our phased improvement program. We replaced the one at the Nassau tank, which is the other tank that has a valve similar to this a couple of years ago. And the last item under furnishings, $3,500 for a water line locator. This just allows the maintenance crew to identify pipes that are underground. I've said in the past, it's like a metal detector that you see people use, just a higher level professional version. Any questions before I jump into capital? There are 10 items in capital for water, and this represents an overall increase of just about $4 million, which, of course, that's eye-opening, to say the least. But as you know, the largest project within this capital outlay is a $4.5 million project for Main Street. And I don't believe Brian Perry's here, but the intention is to borrow money for that project. So although it's included within this packet for transparency's sake, we won't be paying for that strictly through the FY25 budget.
Are you looking for a debt override?
That would be a question for Brian.
No, I don't think so.
No, okay.
And so the first 3 of these capital items should be relatively familiar. I've mentioned them in years past. The first one is $100,000 to go towards our in-house water infrastructure upgrade program. This is a yearly program to basically upgrade or address various aspects of the water distribution system, whether it be replacing fire hydrants, water mains, gate valves, anything along the lines that improves the infrastructure. And the benefit of this program is that the intention is to do most of this in-house without hiring a third-party contractor, so there's a savings beneficial aspect to that. Second item, redevelop 2 wells, the Shawshene Ave and Salem Street wells, for $55,000. This is more of a maintenance item that's been in our capital plan for several years now. As you know, the wells over time build up, and this is essentially just a cleaning to increase production and yield of these wells. The third one is granular activated carbon replacement. This is for $750,000. And this will cover the replacement of the carbon GAC at both the Sargent Water Treatment Plant and the Butters Road Treatment Plant. This has jumped drastically in the past years. This $750,000 figure will cover 2 times replacement at the Sargent Plant and once at the Butters Row. You might ask why. It's because the Sargent Plant is a higher producer plant, and there's more water volume going through, so it exhausts the carbon a lot faster than it does at the Butters Row plant, which is a smaller plant. The fourth one, which I've mentioned and which has been on our capital plan for several years now, that's the $4.5 million project for the Route 38 water main replacement. This project includes replacing the water main on Main Street from Route 62 to Eames Street. The existing water main is a 10-inch cast iron unlined pipe. It's about 70 years old, according to our records. 70.
70.
Right, right. So the plan would be to install, in place of the 10-inch cast iron, we would put in 12-inch ductile iron. And even without the MassDOT reconstruction project on the docket, this pipe was recommended for replacement in our water management plan. So it makes sense, it's sensible to replace it while the road is being reconstructed and dug up.
What's going on with the Woburn Street project?
The water main, what we
Yeah.
talked about?
Yeah.
Well, where are we in the status? We're talking to our consultants. We're waiting for final bid documents. So we anticipate receiving those, I would hope, next week. And if I was to project the schedule, we'll bid that within a month or so. Once we receive the bid results, then we can really, that will dictate what we can and cannot do. We've decided to bid it in phases,
Okay.
right? So we'll bid, the first phase would be from Concord Street to Whale Run. That's phase 1. But we'll also bid it with 2 alternates. So we'll go south to Federal Street as alternate 1, and then we'll go north from Concord Street up to Great Neck would be alternate 2. That way, when we receive the bid prices, we can basically see where we are, what the market dictates, what we can do, what we can afford. And I guess to take it a step further, we have allocated $1 million for 2 years, FY '28 and '29, I believe, in the future, just to have as a placeholder, because it's expected that the current funding we have from ARPA is not going to be enough to construct the whole Woburn Street.
Okay. Thank you.
The next item I have is $130,000 to clean the the Browns Crossing well field. This is the largest well producer in town. There are 15 wells on that site. The next one Jamie had already mentioned, and we've gone over the heavy-duty Vector truck for $330,000, as Jamie mentioned. That $330,000 would come from water funds. We have a few more here. We have one purchase of a small pickup truck to replace our existing Water 10 for $36,000. Our existing Water 10 is the 2011 Ford Ranger, and this is used by maintenance and treatment staff for small-scale jobs that don't require dump trucks, pickup trucks that are of a larger scale. We have 2 inspectional services items here, one for $35,000, one for $37,000. The first one is to cover the funding for the inspectional services for the new water main that will be part of the new Butters Row Bridge. And then I also have a second request here for $37,000 to cover inspectional services for the water main on the Main Street Bridge, which is located down near Town Park. And then the last item I have is a $100,000 slate for a new transformer at the Sargent Water Treatment Plant. This is an ongoing situation. The electrical transformer at the plant requires replacing. It's original, it was built in the late 1980s. So we're just having discussions with Reading Light now to coordinate a plan to replace this unit. And those, we expect to have some sort of outcome in the next month or so.
Ironically, I got my water bill today, and it's a 6% increase.
Good. Yep.
What is the free cash within the water and sewer department?
I wouldn't have that answer here.
What was the question?
What is the free cash?
Going to the Vector truck.
No. What is the free cash within the water and sewer department?
Oh, that I don't.
Okay? If you could, sir, please ask Brian to get it for me and send it to the committee.
As far as water, that's the end. I can answer any questions you may have, or I can jump right into sewer.
Let's go into sewer.
All right?
Just
Yes,
for
sir.
clarification, first of all, I appreciate the transparency and all of this information and how thoughtful your planning is. It's nice to see, understanding how much money in infrastructure we have invested in, that you have a thoughtful plan, like with the capital improvement plan, to continue to maintain that investment. Everything included in the water and sewer budget is funded through water rates and sewer rates.
Correct.
None of this is funded through taxation, is that correct?
That's correct.
I was a little
Yeah.
confused by your question about an override, that's.
No, not an
that's the
over.
question.
It's just that they have a separate budget, and I just want to see how much is in their free cash.
No, I understand that question,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I understood. There was a question about the override that messed me up.
Yeah.
Each of these accounts are essentially self-sustaining.
Self-sustaining
right?
through fees, through
Exactly.
rates, excuse me.
Exactly. The rates act as your revenue, and then you have your expenses, which are, we just went over, and then what's remaining would be the free cash or
Yeah.
retained earnings.
Yeah.
So for the sewer rate, that went up 8% this year.
Yes, I know. I'm on sewers too.
I would just like to add through you, Mr. Chairman, we were asked in the fall to kind of highlight some of the grants that we've been applying for. And in the interest of time, I won't go through those, but at the back of your packets, there's a list, a lengthy list of all potential and pending grants that we've applied for that may offset some of those costs as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Wow. Nice.
It is nice.
Okay. I'll
Going to
jump
sewage?
right into sewer. So that's on page 78 of your, 76 of your white booklet. Okay, so as you'll see, there's a total budget of $3.6 million, and there's an overall decrease in sewer of $27,388. That's a negative 0.7% decrease. Starting with personnel services, there's a total budget of $103,801. That is an increase of $2,541. That's a 2.5% jump. And similar to water, that's related primarily to contractual obligated steps. No additional personnel are requested, and no cost of living has been factored in. Moving down to materials and supplies, there's a total budget of $3,295,600. There's one adjustment, which is typical, and this represents an overall decrease of about $135,000. And that decrease is in the MWA sewer assessment. That decreases by that $135,000 amount. As you know and as you see, this is by far the largest expense in the sewer enterprise fund. And just so you are aware, I mention it every year, but it's worth noting that this number is a projection right now through the MWRA, and the final number typically comes in June. However, it's very likely that they're usually very on the ball as far as the numbers, and it's likely that the projection is lower, or actually higher, I misspoke, than the final. And then with this sewer, we only have one capital outlay, and that's a total budget of $135,000. And that's to design the replacement of the industrial way sewer pump station. That's a metal subgrade pump chamber and concrete wet well. It was constructed in the 1960s, and it was identified relatively recently as being in poor condition. So the expectation would be to fund the design for the replacement of that project in FY '25 with construction to happen in the subsequent year.
What's the estimated cost of it?
Of the construction,
Yeah,
we're looking at probably $500,000 or so as of now. That's the initial
okay,
estimate we were given by the consultant.
okay. Thank you.
And as far as sewer, that's really it. So that concludes my presentation. Unless anybody has any questions, I can certainly.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none? Scott?
I have a question going back to Mr. McGolby, if we don't mind. Talking about the Vector truck, and I'd sent him a few questions earlier. You answered almost everything, so thank you very much for that. Did we explore the life cycle and the cost of a used truck in looking at that?
Yeah, we did actually. That's a good question, Mr. Neville. This is a specialty item. We actually did talk to a vendor. The thing about used jet trucks is they're few and far between. Once there is one on the market, they typically disappear within weeks, just because they're in such high demand. So trying to trying to budget for something and then either buy off a state bid list or procure it properly when there really aren't many available, and the ones that are available have been deemed no longer useful from a contractor. And generally speaking, if a contractor can squeeze any more profit out of a piece of machinery, he's going to do that, or she's going to do that. So this particular piece of equipment is used in wet trenches with safety-sensitive excavating, and it's, in my opinion, something we really want to go brand new on. The last one we had was a brand new purchase. It lasted a good 15 years. Quite honestly, the problem that we're having with the vehicles in general, and this is all of our vehicles, is just lack of space to put them indoors year-round. So is that a segue into a capital item in future years, or maybe some new housing for us, possibly? But we are investing some big dollars in these pieces of equipment, and $660,000 is not a cheap vehicle.
Okay. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
On your capital outlay that you had on page 5, you just mentioned swing gate behind the Beltwell School.
Yeah.
It's small cost, but those, we already have them there, don't we? Are they? I think that they're really old.
So
Is that what the reason is?
There is one gate that was located over behind where the playground is.
Yeah.
This past summer, we were asked by the school department to relocate that gate down to the other side of the building.
Okay.
So with the consolidation of the Wildwood, they are now looking for us to replace the original gate so that they would have two at the Beltwell.
Okay, thank you. And then, last year at town meeting, we voted on high school turf and to look at that. And I know there was discussion, and you gave a great explanation for, there was discussion about looking into grass and turf. You gave a very good explanation of why we, maintaining turf is a good option for that site with the investment costs that we'd already put into designing it. When we put it out for schematic design or bid or, whatever the process is for that, did we look at changing it over to grass?
Yeah, so we actually had a public meeting on that in July, last summer, and that we brought that to the select board because we talked to town meeting, and the decision there was to consider natural versus synthetic. So we brought it to a public meeting at the select board in July, and we kind of vetted out the positives and negatives of going synthetic versus natural turf. And the outcome of that was the selectmen voted to endorse a synthetic field, but also for us to explore options. So the design is currently underway with that, and what we're going to do is have some adults on that so that it will be synthetic, meaning a synthetic carpet. What's unclear at this point is whether we'll be reusing the crumb rubber that's there or replacing that with some sort of organic fill material. We have chosen not to go full natural turf at that particular field because essentially that field is used constantly. And if we had a season like we had last year with all the rain, it would be almost certain that we would have to displace sports to other fields. And if you recall, when that field went in, one of the primary drivers of that decision was that we were trying to take some of the use off of the other fields so that we could rest them. So if we were to go natural there, it would drive up our other costs, namely personnel. I would be actually in front of you not asking for one Parks and Grounds employee. I'd be likely asking for 3. because we would have to go back to painting 5 sports worth of lines on that field almost twice a week. Every time we cut the grass twice a week, we're cutting the lines off. And so fertilizer, seed, IPM, pest management, irrigation, I mean, the list goes on. So when you're looking at the overall costs, although it is, you know, a costly item in our capital plan, right now it's listed as 800. It may go up to maybe a 10% increase there, maybe closer to 9. We won't know till the bids come back. But when you're looking at a 12 to 15-year life of a field, if we were to have to justify another member of personnel at $60,000 a year, it's actually cheaper for us to go synthetic.
And if I may, when that field opened, it opened up thousands of hours of playing time.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's year-round. It really opened up a lot of different sports year-round, minus the snow.
One final thing,
No, go ahead.
for anybody who is watching, you talked about the summer program. I actually did it when I was, I think, right after I graduated high school for the summer, and it's great time to work outdoors all summer. I would recommend it to anybody who's looking for a summer job.
And that's a great plug, we're actually finding that we're hiring some of our full-time staff members. I can think of 4 or 5 of them anyway, off the top of my head, that started as summer help, and they've continued on, got their CDLs, and have now worked with us full-time, and they're some of our best employees.
Nice.
So it's a good feeder program for us, and, you know, even though we only have them for several weeks, it's definitely worth getting their feet wet, and we can certainly see how they work out if their resume were to come across our desk full-time.
Anything else, Scott?
Good, thank you.
Anything else from the committee?
You should send a posting, when you post that job, you should send a posting over to the guidance department at
Sure.
Shawshing Tech.
Sure.
High school too.
Just make sure that it's for Wilmington residents only when you do it
Yes.
for Shawshing Tech, to be clear to all those kids, but. It's a great.
Yes, sir.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chair, this was a great presentation
Outstanding.
by these two gentlemen, and working with them over the past few months, preparing this budget, they put a lot of work into it, and they made it as lean as they could, and they've really worked with my office and myself to try and put forward a lean budget, a good budget, and I think they've done that, they've accomplished that. And
They did a very good job.
Yeah, and it's just another example of the good men and women that work for the town of Wilmington.
It's cooperation, and that's what counts.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Public comments?
Yes, with regard to the vac truck,
Point of
I
order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
How much time does this speaker have left?
3 minutes.
On the 3-minute limit that you established?
He spoke for 3 minutes the first time he spoke. I kept track.
Okay, then, Mr. McDonald, thank you. Have a good night.
okay, it's just my opinion that this
Mr.
board's
McDonald,
supposed to be an
your
oversight
three-
committee and it should be drilling down.
your
I just
three-
had a simple question
your
for the
3
general
minute-
public.
Your 3 minutes.
Mr. LeBeo,
your
are
3
you
minutes
testing
up.
for NDMA
Sir,
in the
your
water?
3 minutes are up.
Really? So
Yes.
what's this, a communist country or something?
No.
We got these vegetables over there on that side that they don't want to.
Excuse me?
Yeah,
Don't say anything.
yeah, they don't want to offer
Your 3
anything.
minutes are up.
Huh?
Okay, let's just move along.
How come nobody else
Okay.
is asking important questions
Next.
such as
Thank you
testing
both
for
watching.
Dennis?
cancer-causing elements?
Thank you very much. It was an
Mr.
excellent
Diorio,
presentation.
my
You guys
hero,
were
bro.
absolutely awesome.
Thank you.
Great.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the support.
Great budget.
Mr. West can answer.
Thanks, guys.
Nice job, Bill.
Tough act to follow.
It's not an act to.
I don't know. What did he say?
How you doing?
I don't know yet. I didn't come with a lot of handouts and things, so I feel a little, it's a tough act to follow. No, I appreciate everybody's time and look forward to many years of going through this with you guys and ladies, and
This is your first time in the hot seat.
it is, you know. You know, we'll see how well it goes, and, you know. Whether I have the answers tonight, I can always get them. If I don't have, there's something that question that someone has. You know, I've been left in good hands from George Hooper and look forward to carrying on for many years. So,
Let's go right into the budget.
all right. So, the goal this year was to level fund, working with Lou and George before he left. We already have 2 large capital projects going on with 2 buildings, so
we were looking at trying to level fund everything else. So we're 47 employees plus the department head, for a total of 48 employees. There are 3 non-represented employees. All others are ASME 1 and 2 members. There is a slight decrease in the account due to a staffing change. The decrease is 0.08%, and that's basically George's longevity and where he was at. There's a pay savings there. My position that I was previously in, obviously we haven't filled that yet, so there's some savings there. There's no overtime increases. We're not looking for any more money there. Seasonal workers are level funded. It's actually a decrease. As they talked earlier, it's been very difficult. Last year was very difficult to get summer help. So we'll definitely have to recruit a little more. That was a great suggestion on using the Shawshene Tech as well. I think we were only able to get 2 last year. Yeah, in the high school, we usually talk to them. But something that used to be very easy to fill is not as easy anymore. So we definitely got to push a little more to try to get some more kids in. It does help with our summer cleanup and help with, again, funding or finding people for future, as some of them will work into the program. Looking at staffing, this year we didn't go for it, but next year I would like to build a case towards adding a full-time painter. You know, we have over 800,000 square feet of building. A lot of it's older. We paint where we can, when we can, with our staff that exists today. I got a price recently to paint the middle school interior. It worked out about almost $2 a square foot, so it was basically $300,000 just to paint the inside of the middle school. So staffing with with a full-time painter, they could be painting around town for many years to come.
Are we still using inmates?
We use them on external buildings, not in schools.
Okay.
So we use them for the Hardin Tavern, for the Hearst Barn, the Art Center, the Veteran Center. You know, places like that we can use them, and it works out really well. We've also used the inmates for their program for. We've installed. They produce the cabinets for the fire department. They produce the cabinets for the senior center. So using them has been a great resource for the department, and it's a great way to give back.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
fuel, there's no increase in fuel account. Estimated usage is 200,000. 200,000 gallons at $3.50 a gallon, approximately $700,000. Estimated average usage of natural gas is 320,000 therms. The blended cost of about $162 a therm works out to $520,020 for natural gas.
How many of our buildings are natural gas?
I can tell you that in 1 second. We have converted 10 buildings to natural gas. Some of the buildings we'd like to do, there's no natural gas near there.
Okay.
Some of them, we have to determine what we're gonna do with the buildings as we
Yeah,
build schools
yeah.
and do things. So it's difficult to put the investment into change it over when we don't know for sure. We've seen, I wanna say the last time I looked at it, was about a 48% savings going to natural gas. But finding when the right time to do it and make sure that we're gonna have the building for years to come. When we did the bout wall, when I first started with the town, we talked to National Grid and said, okay, there's 3 schools, bring a line down from Boutwell Street, big enough so that when we, later on, we can go to the other 2 schools. And their basic answer was, you know, right now you're not doing the project, so we're only gonna bring a line big enough from Boutwell Street to the Boutwell that will feed the Boutwell. So now when we go down the road, when we do convert those other buildings, we have to go all the way back to Boutwell Street with that natural gas. So sometimes it's not as easy to get, or it's not as logical to get their assistance to do things because they're not as eager as we are to convert things. You know, one of the buildings we'd like to do down the road would be converting the middle school. That's one of our largest schools. We use a lot of oil
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And it'd be great to convert that over. And the current boilers could be converted, but they're also original to the building, so at some point it would probably be a capital improvement.
Yeah, were they 24 years old now?
24 years old.
Yeah.
Yep. We have fortunate to have a maintenance staff, an HVAC tech on hand, and between our vendors, we've done a great job maintaining them through the years, and they run strong. So, you know, we'll keep those running for years to come, but ideally, when it does come time to replace them, working with National Grid to try to pull that line down from Boutwell Street and feed that
Do
building.
they give the town any incentive at all, or?
They don't, they cover the first, I wanna say 800 feet, or it used to be 800 feet, and then after that, you pay a certain amount per foot.
Okay.
And so, the incentive comes, their rebates are decent, but, you know, it would have to probably do the whole boiler room over to get the value of it.
Yeah.
But we're just gonna, we're adding, and the conversion's not enough to make them interested, or, you know, fall into their good rebates, higher rebates.
Okay, great, thank you.
The other thing to keep in mind is the new senior center and the town hall, new town hall, are gonna be all electric. They're not gonna be, fossil fuels. And, we're not eliminating those buildings as of right, there'll be a repurposing committee that will be put together to decide what to do with these buildings. But until then, we'll still be, you know, heating them, putting electricity in them, so all our utilities will stay the same. So we're technically adding square footage to the town and have to take care of those buildings. And some of these buildings, people are trying to use, will try to use still once we're
Yeah.
moved into the new buildings, until we make a decision on what we're gonna do. But I think when we first went to town meeting, we basically said these buildings were either end of life or needed a lot more and didn't fit the need for what was there. And that's why we appropriated money and built these buildings. But now, we're trying to hang on to some of those, so that committee will help determine what to do. But, you know, there is a federal guideline to try to be carbon-free, and that's why these new buildings are more and more going towards electric buildings. When you look at the senior center today, it's, I have the number right here. It's, for fuel and electricity, it costs us $18,000 a year. The new senior center is also obviously bigger, but an all-electric building will cost us $70,000 a year in electric. So
So that's not gonna be gas?
that's not gonna be gas. There'll be a gas generator for backup, but the building itself will be electric. And by 2050, we're supposed to be fossil-free and, on buildings, and that's why a lot of the stuff is going that way. But there is electricity is a lot more expensive, as far as rates to get the same amount of energy.
If it was gas, what would, just out of curiosity.
I did ask that, and I
Square
didn't,
footage is double. so-
yeah, so, I did ask that, but,
70, be half.
yeah. So it's, you know, those are decisions, and it's tough, because even with the new school they're talking about an all-electric school, so now do 168,000 square feet, all-electric building, but that's where the federal guidelines are pushing everything. And so that's something that, as we move down the road, more and more will probably go all-electric, and, you know, like I said, you gotta look at Reading Light, whether they can feed, the grid can feed all this, you know, between
That's
people.
right, yeah, you're right.
You know, the infrastructure, they're building a substation now. They're trying to do in-territory generation with projects for solar systems and on roofs and anywhere they
Well,
can do those.
the new town hall, school administration building, and the senior center will have roofs that can support solar.
There's two things about that. We're in a power purchase agreement with Reading Light, so we can't go get another power purchase agreement for solar from anyone else. And for us to do solar, we'd either have to buy it outright, or Reading Light would put solar on our roof, would lease the roof to them, and they'd get the benefit. The way Wilmington would, I guess, make out would be it would help keep our rates lower, because it would help them control their cost. But we wouldn't be able to take that electricity being produced on that solar panel and feed our building. Would give it back to Reading Light and then buy it back,
So we're locked into leasing with them.
because of the 20-year agreement.
Essentially, so we get a lower,
Well, we could
get a lower
outright
rate.
buy them.
We could outright buy them and then, and look at that, and that would be our only way to do something like that. So, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it might be something down the road we look at.
You
We
also,
just
you
want,
also own repairs though, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you own everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
And we just walked, 2 roofs with, Reading Light recently, and, they were looking at renting or leasing the roof space.
Mhm.
And, I think it was the West and the Shawsheen. The problem becomes, whatever building they put it on, they're looking for 25 years 20 to 25 years. And we're not sure where we're going with some of these schools over
Yeah.
the next 20 to 25 years. And then they don't want to own a roof issue. And a lot of these roofs we have replaced, but now they want to know all the warranty information. They want, because they want to make sure there's nothing that
Yeah.
stops them. So, so those are just some of the things to keep in mind as far as the electricity and the utilities, because the way the world is going with fossil-free, more and more will be electric, but finding a way to fund these and do these things.
Isn't it fossil fuels that create most of our electricity anyway?
Well,
Isn't it coal? I heard that the majority of electricity these days is from coal.
Gas plants.
Boy, have we done a 360.
If you look at Reading Light's portfolio, they have hydro, they have solar, they have wind,
Yeah.
they have nuclear, they have natural gas. In North Reading, they have their own little natural gas generator for off-peak stuff. So when the peak rises, they run that. So, it is being produced still with it, so it's kind of odd that we're talking that. And there isn't enough wind out there, there isn't enough solar out there, so, I guess if you don't set a goal and start striving for it, you'll never get there. So the federal government set the goal, and Reading Light and other companies are trying to get there. We are fortunate it's Reading Light. I'd be willing to bet it's almost double if we were National Grid electricity.
Yeah.
So, they do a pretty good job. Their increase this year, and I'll talk about that next, they were talking about a 10% increase when we started doing the budget. And it was basically 8.6 to 10%. I sit on the Citizens Advisory Board. We were there the other night. They think they're gonna come in lower, but the numbers we had when we did this was gonna be somewhere around 10%. So there is an increase in the electric account. The Public Buildings Department continues to improve the energy usage by replacing, installing energy efficient equipment. The RMLD is estimating a 10% increase in our town and school buildings, approximately 1.5 million kilowatts in usage in fiscal year. So that's 242,000 plus the 10%, an estimated 176,000 kilowatts for 6 months for the new senior center. So we're looking at about $300,000 in electricity this year.
What
because of that.
percentage of our buildings are totally LED?
I believe I have that with me. Since I started with the town, that was one of the main focuses, was trying to convert buildings over. And so as far as 100%, 17 buildings are 100% LED. Then I have 3 at 95%. The high school, believe it or not, isn't all LED. It was, there's T5s in there. And you would have thought in that time frame of going LEED certification that everything would be 100% LED. If you go look in the gym, they're not LED lights. We actually have to change those light bulbs. We have gone to, as they've been replaced, you can buy LED 4-foot fluorescent bulb, or the equivalent of 4-foot fluorescent bulbs. So we've been switching those over. In buildings like this, as bulbs go out, we're still in what are we going to do with this building? So I'm not going to replace all the fixtures. So we've been going to bulbs where we can. So, for a while, Mass Save had a great program. I could buy a 4-foot bulb, LED bulb for $1. And so we were buying them, but you had to use them in a certain amount of time because they could come out and do a inspection. So we were buying them as we went. And then, I want to say it was last year, I got a call from the company, Stand Electric, we buy it from, and they said, well, municipalities no longer fall under that program. So somehow they've come up with a loophole that I couldn't buy them for $1. So now they were like $5 or $6 a piece. But it's still, when you look at it, you get a better light, and it's the right thing to do as far as moving forward. And they lasted a little longer than a fluorescent one. So it's definitely a benefit.
If a bulb went out in one of these lights here, would you have to replace all 4?
No, I could put one of them, depending on the type of ballast that's in them,
Okay.
because the new LEDs, you still have a ballast in there.
Yeah.
So if it's the right type of ballast, I can just take the bulb out and put a new bulb in. If it's not, we have to replace the ballast and the bulbs.
Okay.
So we've done that in like the middle school, we've done every classroom. The fixtures look great, so to replace the fixtures didn't make sense, so we went through and did all the bulbs. Now, in that building, I think there's 20 different styles of light bulb. So I really truly believe whoever designed that, designed Residence Marriott Inns. Because you look at the shapes and sizes and all the different decorative lights, it reminds me of one. But, you know, we've slowly worked on trying to eliminate, but some of these fixtures you can't buy anymore, and there's no conversion kit for it. And you don't want to pull it off the wall and then have this funky hole or weird shape. So trying to manage that has been a little different.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've, again, kept our focus on trying to get it all done. And then anywhere we can, we apply them. Just recently, I don't know if you've driven by the Shawsheen Field. We got a call from a resident saying they played tennis there all the time. It wasn't that bright. Was there anything the town could do? Didn't think we could do anything. We looked at our budget, bought some lights. We have 2 electricians on staff, rented a lift, and switched it all to LED and went into a brighter light using
Yeah.
less electricity. And it's made a huge difference. The person, I think, emailed and called 3 times after that. They were out there every night, they love it, and then they called to see if we could keep it on longer, because they knew it was usually going off around the time. So it actually really worked out well, because it's a much better environment. First thing I did was call Brett and say, next time you're in the area, take a ride by, because you may want to run more events there, because this court looks great. So,
Nice.
so again, working to try to find ways to do things better and more efficiently. Town utility budget, we're gonna, again, no increase, $25,000. This does our intrusion alarms, monitoring equipment, and repairs, LPG gas for generators. Our HVAC fund, again, we're gonna level load. There's no increase. The Public Buildings Department utilizes our own staff to perform most of the service that's required. There's also
Bless you.
includes services for preventive maintenance and equipment replacement due to a failure. With the age of and technology and cost of equipment continues to increase by us performing most of the work in-house, we can keep our costs down. Once the new senior center is operational and open, warranties will cover repairs for the first year. This will allow us time to prepare our numbers. There's a lot of unknowns going into these new buildings because it's not the technology we have in town. And believe it or not, when I asked for, hey, what other town has this, so I can get information from them, what did they come across? What were their expenses that they weren't prepared for? We didn't have anything like the senior center anywhere else that anyone could give me data and numbers. So we're gonna learn a little bit on as we move ahead. You know, we'll learn about how we're gonna staff it, how we can do things more efficiently, and what our costs are gonna be. So there is gonna be a little bit of learning curve.
That's not as large as the new town hall school administration building.
No, that's 19,000 square feet. I think the other one's 38 or 39.
It's 42,000.
Yeah, so when you look at that, there's definitely a different size. And when you look at the senior center, it's mostly lighting. There is a kiln and heating and cooling. There's a kiln, there's some computers. But when you go to the new town hall, there's 100 computers, there's servers, there's a lot of technology that's gonna use electricity. So those things, we're not gonna, when you ask them to give you a load, they can give you an idea, but they don't know your true usage. So a lot of that comes not as a surprise, but you know, you learn as you go. So there'll be some estimating going on next year when we start talking about the town hall going live and, you know, looking into that. But
Also,
hopefully we'll learn a lot from the senior center.
We're also looking at more flat panels too.
Yeah, so everything, I mean, you know, you look at a school, if there's 28 classrooms, I have 28 Keurigs, 28 microwaves, 28 toaster ovens, 28 refrigerators, you know. So you look at a town hall, I'm sure we'll have some of that coming in too. You know, the thing about these older buildings is, you know, when, you might have run into, since being someone runs their Keurig, you're running your Keurig, someone's running a space heater, someone's doing, the next thing you know, popping fuses. You know, and we're down here resetting breakers, so, you know, we'll have much more control over that in the new building, hopefully, and there won't be a need to have as many things plugged in, but there'll still be this phantom power, like everyone's charger's probably plugged in the wall at home,
Yeah.
that's using power. Now picture that in a building the size of the new town hall or a senior center, you know, everything you have plugged in is pulling some type of power. So, and it's hard for us to control what those costs are gonna be.
I think that's being taken into consideration.
Yeah. Yep, no, and again, those are the things we'll learn as we go live with this stuff, and and, you know, we'll grow with it.
Thank you.
The school buildings budget is $250,000. We level funded that again. This is for cleaning, sanitizing equipment, building supplies. This also covers safety testing and repairs, elevator state inspections, repairs, paper products, carpentry, plumbing, and electrical supplies and repairs. Our asbestos fund is gonna stay again at $25,000. We've level funded that. Due to some regulatory changes, it was decided to make any large project part of the capital plan. So if we do a boiler room, we also make that a complete abatement of that boiler room. When we did the ceiling tiles in the schools, we did all the piping above the ceiling tiles too. Because to take the ceiling tiles down and put new ones up that didn't have any asbestos in them, but then you didn't take off the pipes, and as it falls onto the tile, it becomes a problem again. So we abated the entire structure above the ceiling, all that piping was removed. So to keep this, our count stays low because we're doing simple repairs and things that need to be done. If we find a plumbing issue, we have to have them come in and abate an elbow or something, that's what this fund's for. Our town building expenses of $220,000, again, is level funded. That again does floor strippers, fire extinguishers, elevator inspections, mechanical, plumbing, carpentry, electrical supplies, pumps, motor repairs, septic and generator services. Supply chain issues do affect a lot of this, so it does make it a little bit more difficult. Miscellaneous facility repairs, again, level funded at $125,000. And, we try to manage all these funds with looking towards the future and maintaining things. And the more preventive and predictive maintenance we do allows us to have a better plan going forward. Roof repairs, again, is level funded at $25,000. And that is, bless you, that is, when we do a capital improvement, we'll do the whole roof. This is just for our leaks that pop up or other issues. I'm convinced that there should be more planes crashing, because on a roof we'll find nuts and bolts from nowhere. So I'm pretty sure they're coming from someplace, so I'm always wondering if it's the planes going by, but.
Wow.
That's dark, I gotta tell you. I don't know if I want to.
Training conferences, we level funded again at $3,500. That's for our MCPPO certifications. We belong to MAPO and MFAA, and then those are great organizations to keep you in the loop of what's going on in other communities. So our overall budget is $5,791,871 last year, and this year is $5,847,060, which is a 0.9% increase. And a lot of that has to do with the electricity rates and increase in usage that we're going to have with the new buildings. Capital improvements, we're not looking for much. Again, we have two major capital improvements going on right now with building two buildings. We're looking for a Super Duty box truck to be replaced. We do all the moving in the town. We help the athletic department move equipment. We move all the voting equipment around. We help down the town beach. We help just about every department. We help set up on the common. So that box truck is used constantly to move things. We actually help move stuff around for the school department on a regular basis. Last summer when we were moving the Wildwood, it was our crew. They didn't hire anyone, we didn't. We used our crew in that truck to move all those classrooms over to the middle school in the west. So it was quite an event, but having that truck is a huge asset to the town. And then we have another car, and the recommendation of the DPW, it's the foreman's car. Basically, they're on borrowed time on it. They basically said, if you look in history of this car, it doesn't last as many miles as we have it. So they're suggesting that we replace that as well. It's a Ford Focus.
You don't have anything in that inventory that you?
I'm going based off their recommendations.
Any cruises coming down the line?
Yeah, I can ask Mike, and we can look at something like that, because it is just the foreman's car.
Yeah.
But it was their recommendation based on what they had available that we replace that vehicle, so.
If you had to buy the car, would it be a hybrid?
He didn't say a hybrid, it wasn't in the quote as a hybrid, it's $31,700. And what it is, if it turns into, if this is a Ford Maverick, right now we do the Ford Focus, but you'll see our foreman driving around with cases of stuff in the back of the seat of the car and in the trunk, and so going to a Ford Maverick gives him a little pickup, and that allows him to move stuff from building to building, so if our box trucks is out doing something, he's doing his rounds, he can bring some supplies to somebody.
Just a recommendation.
Yeah.
Is do a hybrid.
I mean, we could I'll talk to Mike and talk to them about that option.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, the foreman does get to take his vehicle home, so, but, yeah, we'll talk to Mike and see what the best option is on that.
Yeah.
But, we can also talk about, you know, if there is a cruiser being replaced, you know, can we swap that out for the car he has today?
Yeah.
But like I said, it would be nice to have that small pickup to move product around the town.
Because, you know, they're small SUVs, the cruises, you know,
Yeah.
so
Yep,
you still have some space.
yeah, it's definitely better than a Ford Focus.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and one of the reasons they gave him the Ford, it used to be Jeff's old car, and it got cycled down to us for him, for the foreman, and, you know, I think that was probably 5 to 6 years ago, and like I said, so it's got its miles.
Yeah.
It's earned its keep.
I do think that there's some cruises that will be coming offline when
Yeah.
the new ones come in. that
Yep,
were ordered from
and
last
it's
year.
definitely something we can talk about with them, and,
Especially if it's just getting used around town.
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yep. So, you know, like I said, the Super Duty for sure, you know, we've tried to look at everything else, we bumped some projects out. The difficult thing right now, like I said earlier, is we're talking about building schools, we're talking about building buildings. What to do with these other buildings and how much money do we wanna put into them? And that's something that, as this group and the select board and the.
Actually, the select
repurposing-
board is doing a committee, I guess, for,
Yep. Yep, and that's the key, is getting together, and if it makes sense to keep it, let's keep it. If it doesn't make sense to keep it, there's still a cost to get rid of it.
yeah.
And then, or there's a cost to maintain it, or your insurance goes up if you leave it empty, or, you know, so there's all these things we have to think about.
Well, not for this building itself, the asbestos
Yeah.
that's in here, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and you look at it, that, you know, it's the tile, as long as we keep the tile clean and not broken, it's not an issue until it's broken and friable.
And
So,
your furnace.
yeah, so, you know, the furnace
This
here,
building.
ideally, if we were to try to keep this building, we'd probably have to go back to Main Street, pull natural gas from there, come down here, and put units on top of the roof so we could have heating and cooling for the whole building. But then you have
windows.
to replace all the windows, then you have to get rid of the asbestos, then, you know, the tunnels that are under here.
Dominoes.
You know, I've crawled through I spent my first month here, I crawled through the tunnel here. I spent the whole tunnel trying to figure out a way to get any heat out of the system we could, and we found a way to do it. And,
Yeah.
you know, we don't have a ton of control, but it works. So, you know, it's served its purpose, but it may be time to, and that's what that committee will decide. And again, it's part, you guys as well, because you're helping control the costs.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Yeah, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, great job, Dennis.
Thank you.
Shows you really have a great command of the department and a high level of comfort with the numbers, and that's wonderful to see.
Thank you.
Next year with the West Street windows, the reason that the actual replacement has been put off for a year. But I'm concerned because I've gotten a few phone calls from that building saying that the windows are not watertight. Is there any way that we can, you know, do a makeshift repair, make sure those windows are watertight until we can get to 2026 and actually replace them? And I know you had mentioned earlier what a big project it is, and all that's appreciated, and I know you also appreciate, you know, a situation of being in a classroom during a heavy wind-driven rain and having water infiltrating the class.
Yeah, I mean, there's a
Can-
few
can
ways,
we
few things to
figure
look at
something
there.
out?
Communication's a huge thing, you know, making people understand that we are doing what we can. And I am not aware of any issues where water is coming through the window. In many of the old schools, we've found companies that we can buy the hinges that are on the side, and there are things we can do to shore up a window. So if there is
Okay.
something specific, and I'll talk to the principal and I'll talk to the custodian over there. Because
Okay.
our custodians, we use this program called School Dude, and it's basically a work order program. And they can enter it in from their phone or from a computer of an issue in their building. The work order comes into us and we assign someone to do it. So
And teachers have access to School Dude too.
with the, and how we do it, because what we found was teachers will put in every little thing.
Yep.
So they can go to the principal
Yeah.
and then the custodian, because people were trying to, it was only getting too much minutia.
Yep, that makes sense.
Or they didn't think it was happening fast enough because we're waiting on a part or budget or whatever.
They put it in
And then they
again.
put it in again and again and again, so. But when you look at the west windows, as we keep talking about, are we gonna build a building, we're not gonna build a building. When you're gonna put $3 to $4 million into a building to replace the windows, they're basically called curtain walls. That's basically from the ground cement all the way to the roof gets replaced in that building. So it's not just the windows, it's everything, all the doors, all the vents, all that would get replaced as part of that program. And since I've been here, it's moved out a few times because of conversations of where are we going with it. And we wanna be financially responsible, but we should communicate better to the people in the buildings then
Right.
of what's going on. I really thought we had a shot at doing it this coming summer, but it doesn't, again, with all the turmoil of what we're doing and what direction we're heading in. At one point, they were talking about trying to build 2 schools, so, but I think if we communicate properly and make sure that if someone does, I'll talk to, like I said, the people over there, if they have a window leaking or an issue leaking, we usually address that stuff right away. I mean,
Okay.
talking glass, plexiglass and windows is not a big deal. And if there's something more than that, we can definitely seal up something. There's enough operable windows to seal up something completely if there's one window out of the whole group.
Okay,
There is a problem.
good to know.
I know a few teachers over there, and they do complain about water getting into their rooms during rainstorms.
Yeah. And I said, no one has come to me with it, but I will back into that.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Because, again, if it's something that we can repair, we'll definitely look at that.
I think what you said earlier is so important. It's communication, and I think that the communication had broken down a little bit. So the issues remain, and they seem to get worse, obviously, as every year goes by. But the frustration also grows with that. So I think a little bit of attention to it would help ease the frustration and maybe open up the communication.
Yep.
And I think that's one of your goals
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
So,
And it's funny how fast people got to know who I was. Say hi to my name, and I'm like, all right, I have no idea who you are.
Dennis,
celebrity.
what's going on with the Hardin?
The Hardin Tavern?
Yeah.
Couple things. So we went out to bid on the Hardin Tavern roof, and we got estimates that appeared to be what we should be going out to bid for. We had it designed, went out to bid for it, and so we appropriated $98,000 for the main house roof and $68,000 for the carriage house. It was determined at the time to combine the two of them because we thought we might get more people to bid if they thought they were gonna get both of them. And we got 3 quotes, well, we got 3 packages in. One came in after hours, so we couldn't, we don't open it. So we have no idea what that one is. But the lowest bid was $288,400.
Is that for both roofs or just?
For both roofs. And the other one was $468,000. So, caught our engineer off guard. Couple things happen. A lot of times, the wood shake roof is a specialty. It's not something that everyone does. Roofers tend to not want to take risks in winter, so sometimes they bid higher because they're like, you know what? If they say yes, it's worth, I got myself covered. So they bid it up and see if you'll bite. What we're gonna try to do is change the spec up, because we were replacing the fascia board, the gutters, and anything that needs to be repaired, obviously, and then the roofs. What we're gonna try to do is go out with a bid with add-alts, do the roof, and then keep the gutters we have, the fascia board we have, because we can always go down the road with our carpenters and/or go back and do those later on. But look at replacing, going back with the bid and see if we get something more competitive. We're also gonna split them and see, there's a lot of people that do asphalt, so we might be able to get, 12 bids for the asphalt, and we can do the, carriage house, where we're probably only gonna still get the 1 or 2 or 3 for the, cedar shake roof. When they did that in 2010, it was basically stated, they did for 40,000. So when we were looking at 98,000, you'd think, okay, we're probably pretty good there, and we're not even in the ballpark.
When
So
do you expect to go back out to bid and
There-
separate?
we're hopefully gonna go back out in the spring. I'm working with the, engineer to wrap up a couple other things, and, our goal is to go out in the spring, and hopefully we'll have more attention to the people trying to fill the schedule for the summer. And that's our goal. And like I said, worst case scenario, everyone that looked at it, they don't think it's, in bad shape. They really don't. They're like, why are you replacing it? But we're like, well, we've got money appropriated, that's what we're gonna do, so give us a price. So, we've controlled the water, or the leak around the chimney, that's where the leak was. We have control of that right now, and we'll go back out to bid. We're also, I met with, I believe his name's Matt, the curator, and Bonnie, Monday I think it was. And they're gonna apply for a grant. They found a historic grant that will match up to 100% of what we have. So that 98,000 may be actually, 196,000.
Great.
That would be great if we get the grant, but if we don't get the grant.
We're still gonna go back
we
out.
Still have to get
Yeah,
this done.
and again,
I'm
I-
confused though. I apologize.
yeah, no problem.
I thought the roof was leaking and bad, but the people who you're gonna hire to replace it are asking why you're replacing it.
What they're saying is that when a cedar shake roof goes bad, you start cupping.
Okay?
And they don't see cupping. What they see is, around the chimney in that area, because that's where the water leak is, that, does it just need to be reflashed and work there?
So can we just reflash and rework? Why do we have to replace the roof?
The decision was made to
Yeah,
replace the whole
There
roof.
was
And
also a
actually-
lot of lifting
Is
at the end,
I
at the
I don't know
edge of
anything
the
about
roof.
roofs, other than the fact that when I needed a replacement, I called in the experts and they said, yes, it needed to be replaced.
Yeah.
10 years earlier, I had a similar problem, had a leak around the chimney. They replaced the flashing rather than the whole roof.
So,
Chris, a few of our members went out to,
I remember last year we went out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
for anything.
No, I understand, but if
In the-
that's been fixed and it's not leaking
in the
now-
carriage house-
we haven't fixed the roof itself. We contained the leak and controlled it.
All right.
And so there's nothing in the building
I
getting
just-
damaged. There's nothing getting damaged. It's not damaging ceilings, it's not going down walls, it's not going, so we have it contained to that point of control as we try to find a way. I mean, worst case scenario, we go up to bid again, and we don't come in where we need to be. Maybe we are just reflashing around that chimney for 20 grand, or whatever the price is. And that's what would have to determine, and then if we can get that grant, we can go from there, but,
Not for anything. On the carriage house, when you looked up from the inside, you could see the sky.
around the chimney.
Yeah.
In different areas.
And again, that's flush. Those other areas, if you look at, because when we walked it with Bonnie, and again, you may be able to see something else, there were points where you could see the metal flashing. It wasn't a hole. The only hole I know that was active was around the chimney. So if there's something else besides the one around the chimney, I'm not aware of
Yeah,
that.
They-
we could see clouds through it.
And
Around
not-
the chimney?
and not
No,
for-
not just around the
No.
chimney.
Okay.
Yeah,
and not-
it was an eye-opening experience.
And not for
Yeah.
anything, the Historical Commission has removed the items from the second floor and brought them downstairs because of the leaks.
Yeah, and hopefully separating the two,
Yeah.
we'll get enough people that want to do it for $60,000 and get that one done
Yeah.
that way.
Well,
So I
they
think
should
that's our
come
only
back
option.
to us if they can't get the grant, because we need.
Yeah, if we can't get the grant, then it's a
Kids-
conversation.
kids keep doing patchwork.
So, we'll work on whatever option B is gonna be. But if we go back out and our price is still coming around the same, 288,000, then we've gotta look at different numbers, and we gotta look at a different plan.
What about the
That-
windows?
Windows.
Yeah, how
The windows, they just finished the design on that, and we'll be going out to bid with that, hopefully within the next month. And that will, get those going. So, they come in, they measured everything, they met with, Historic Commission and us, and they've created the design and the spec for it. And, so that, they finished that up, wanna say it was last week, I got an email from them that they'll have everything wrapped up for me.
And they'll match the other windows that we've already
They'll
replaced?
go in and do whatever repairs need to be done and hopefully get them operational and,
Okay.
you know, and that's, again, you know, based on, I have the number written here somewhere, what we appropriated for that.
Let's not tell the folks who are bidding what we have counted. Let them bid before we share the
Yeah.
number.
Yeah. A lot of it's public knowledge because it was approved in
I
town
know,
meeting,
I
so.
know.
So,
Make it a little harder for them.
yeah, but, yeah, we'll definitely
Still gonna be the low
get
bid.
that one going. Well, they now call it the most responsive and responsible bidder, you know.
So concerning the windows, one of the biggest things that struck most of us, I think, was the framing around the window and how worn it was and paint was chipping off of it. And, you know, you could easily, it framed the picture that looked like a
You're talking on the
tremendous
inside.
amount of neglect on the inside.
Yeah.
So will that be
We're
repaired
looking
as
at,
well?
that was part of the spec, was trying to do the framing and bring it up to code. We have had our carpenters over there, we've done some ceiling repair, we've done some wall repair. We are not historic preservationists.
Right.
So we're doing what we can to help
Okay.
sustain. I think and when you talk to I don't know if you already talked to them, but the Historic Commission, I think they'll back the fact that we've been there.
Oh, yeah, there's
trying
no
to-
question about that.
No,
It's
trying to
just,
help them with the,
we could
other
put a
things.
brand-new window in, and if we have that same frame,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah,
gonna, we're not
the-
gonna get the look we want.
the goal was to be operational windows, when we're done, you know, and, would still be historic windows because you're gonna be single pane glass, you're still gonna be,
Yeah.
you know, so it's to try to make it all work and still state of its era was the goal. So, again, we'll go out to bid on that and hopefully we'll come in around this right ballpark as far as money.
Okay.
But it's definitely has our focus. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
something we're not, trying to be successful on.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Megan, your assistant town clerk, has done the work with the grant, finding the grant. Excuse me. And it's obviously in the early stages, but they just have to make sure it's the historical preservation, you know, obviously it's a registered building and all that, but it's very early, and we just got the email yesterday on it, so it is, the assistant town clerk did a lot of work with the grant for the, to redo the death certificates of our killed in action from World War II. She got a grant for that, and then that's how she found this grant. She's working on some other grants. So our assistant town clerk, Megan, has done a good job of finding.
That's
That's
great.
awesome.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Socotec, who's the, used to be Russo Bar, that's the engineer, they actually have experience with historic buildings and things, so as part of the grant, that's one of the necessities is the person that designs and works on the roofing of this project have to have experience in that field, and they do. So that will help with the grant as well.
And, Mr. Town Manager,
Yes,
how are we doing on the car over there?
car,
In the carriage house.
The carriage house.
The antique
The antique car?
oh, I don't know. Truck.
truck.
Is an antique.
There's an antique truck that is owned by Lars Nielsen
Yeah.
Okay.
and has been garaged in the carriage house. We don't own it, we don't insure it. We have people walking in and out of it.
It's a liability.
It's a lot, we're liable for it because it is housed with us for damage, and so we brought that to the attention of the Historic Committee, and I've been reading their minutes, and they are working on it. I think they're
Working on, like,
working
trying to
on
get it back
having
to
the title transferred to the town. But in the meanwhile, who's insuring it? And, you know, there's a lot of legalities there. Not only that, it's an antique, so it has value that none of us can actually assess.
Full
what-
disclosure, I had no idea.
Yeah.
No one asked me anything about
Mm.
Guess what we're asking now?
it. Okay.
If you could find out for Thursday,
Absolutely.
it'd be great.
Absolutely.
Frank was wanted to add something, he's on the committee.
Yes, sir?
I'm watching his time as well.
Thank you.
I'll be brief. Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road, also a member of the Select Board. The truck that you're talking about is I believe it's a 1921 truck, and it was owned by Herb Barrows, and Herb Barrows owned what's now known as Textron, that whole field and all that. What happened was that truck ended up at one point at Edaville Railroad down in Carver, and then when Edaville Railroad was closing, the Nielsen family bought the truck, and they were like, great, we got a truck. What are we going to do with it? So somehow it ended up at the carriage house and has been there. And I've heard that Bonnie and the Nielsens have been discussing the transfer of the truck. So I don't, where exactly it is, I'm not sure, but I know that's been an active situation between, there's 2 brothers, I think, that own it, 2 of the Nielsen, I think Fred and Stu own it, and it's stored in the carriage house and has been there for probably 20 years.
Right.
I think the last time it was pulled out was in the 275th parade. Laz actually, they put it on a flatbed, and Laz rode on, Laz Jr., if you will, rode on it. So that's
Thank you.
a little bit of history.
Thank you.
I'm under by 3 minutes.
You have about a minute and a half if you like.
Anything else?
I'm good if you're good. But I thank everyone for their time and
Any,
look forward to working with you.
any questions from the committee for Dennis, or?
Great handle on what's going on, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may again, when I was given this charge a little over 3 months ago, I kind of reached out to department heads and said, hey, do the best we can do to come in with some lean budgets. We have some big projects going on, and this is just another example of Dennis and George working with us to try and put things off the best we could. Obviously, you can't put everything off, but this is another example of a fairly, it's a good-sized budget, and it's coming in right.
It's
basically
lean,
on the
and
number.
I applaud Dennis for, this is your first budget before us. You did very good.
There was a lot of pressure.
You did very, you did very good, you know.
I was in a meeting with him today, and he knocked it out of the park.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Feel free to reach out to me if there's anything I can do to help anyone.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis. Good luck.
Thank you.
Next is the minutes from March 23rd and April 29th. Has everyone read the minutes?
Yes, and these are the amended ones.
Yes, these are the amended ones. I'll entertain a motion for the March 23rd one.
Motion to approve the March 23rd minutes?
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Approved.
Make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of Saturday, April 29th, 2023, which is a meeting that we hold just prior to town meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Passes. Any public comments? None? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Passes.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank
Lou?
you.
Thank you, everybody else.
Very,
I'll
very,
reach out
very
to you
good.
tomorrow with those answers.